Welcome back to the Scaredy Cat Guide, my friends. My name is Jenny, and today we are talking about Remy's Ratatouille adventure in Epcot. If you're new here, this is the channel where we talk about Disney and anxiety, we talk about sensory issues, and really just anything that you might want to know if you're an anxious rider at Disney World, like me. Now, Remy's Ratatouille adventure is one of my all-time favorite rides. It is so immersive, it's so much fun, and it's definitely marketed as a family-friendly attraction. However, even though it's definitely a beloved classic with our friend Remy and all the characters that we know and love, there are definitely some things that we're going to talk about that you might just want to be aware of if you're an anxious rider. So without further ado, let's dive into those details. This bite-sized adventure contains simulated thrills, heat, water, and smell effects, and some sudden loud noises, including a couple of jump scares, but we'll talk about that later. On top of that, this attraction also contains some spinning ride vehicles, large screens, and a few claustrophobic moments in the queue. So let's start off by talking about the thrill elements. Now, while this is definitely an attraction that is on the tamer side as far as thrill elements go, there are definitely a few moments that can veer into that intense territory. Like with many other rides in Disney World, you will definitely come across some somewhat perilous situations in the ride story itself. You will find yourself dodging giant obstacles and people, and of course, as you are supposedly shrunk down to the size of a rat, this attraction comes with all of the same perils and threats that you might encounter if you were actually rat-sized. Now, of course, this comes with unexpected maneuvers. You do have a simulated drop, which is very, very similar to the waterfall drop that you might encounter in Minnie and Mickey's Runaway Railway. It's not an actual drop, but it definitely can feel like it. You've got this massive screen in front of you, and even though the ride vehicles don't plummet downwards, it can definitely have that thrilling effect. And in my case, actually still gave me some of that stomach in your throat feeling. Now, this is definitely not as intense as an actual drop, but it's at least worth knowing that it's coming. Now, perhaps what is more intense than the simulated thrills is the sensory overload on this ride. Now, if you are like me and you have some sensory sensitivity, this attraction is really not for the faint of heart. It's not as bad as some like Figment's Journey into Imagination over in Epcot, but there are definitely some things that can feel quite overstimulating. You will of course come across some very delicious piped in smells. Now, these are not super abrasive, they are not unpleasant in any way, shape, or form. They really are overall just a very pleasant experience. Now, on top of these piped in smells, you also have some heat and water effects. Now, the heat effects just happen once. There is one moment in the ride where you are underneath an oven, it gets turned on, and the quote-unquote fire appears above your head. You feel this blast of heat and you get out of there, scurry away as quickly as you can. This heat isn't oppressive, it really is just for the theming and the immersion of the ride, but it can definitely kind of take you off guard and feel a little overwhelming if sensory things are not really your favorite. Now, the water effects happen a little more frequently. There is a moment where a mop kind of flicks you away, you get splashed in that water from the mop. There is also a popping champagne bottle that sprays you towards the end of the ride. And speaking of popping champagne bottles, there are a few sudden loud noises on this attraction as well. Now, aside from the popping champagne and some other moments that can be a bit startling, it is also important to note that there are some pretty intense jump scares on this attraction. Now, even though the ride itself isn't particularly scary and the bad guys are the familiar faces that you will recognize from the movie itself, there is a point on the attraction where you are being pursued by Chef Skinner, and because you are the size of a rat, he is pretty massive up on the screen in front of you. Now, there are no animatronics or anything like that. All of the action here takes place on screen, but there are a few jump scares where Chef Skinner kind of pops out of nowhere and screams, and it's really loud and frightening, and honestly, it still gets me every time that I ride. So just be prepared. If you don't love jump scares or those kind of frightening moments, just know that they're coming. Again, they're not terribly scary, on purpose as far as the actual theming goes, but they're definitely pretty jarring. Now moving on, let's hop into the potential for motion sickness. Now, if you're prone to motion sickness, I would definitely look out for this one. You will absolutely encounter some large screens that take up really most of the ride's runtime. So of course, you've got some rushing and kind of disorienting visuals that come along with those large screens. And on top of everything, you also have some spinning ride vehicles. Now, the spinning you'll encounter here is really not that different from what you'd encounter on other trackless rides like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway or even Rise of the Resistance, but coupled with the large screens, it definitely could be a recipe for motion sickness if you're prone to that. Now, briefly, I did want to touch on the claustrophobic element here. Even though I wouldn't call this ride claustrophobic in general, there are definitely still a few moments that I would look out for. So like with many other attractions in Walt Disney World, this one has a somewhat claustrophobic queue. Now, not all of the queue is a small and enclosed space, but there definitely are a few tight hallways and a few moments that can feel pretty confining as you make your way through. Now, a lot of this I think has to do with the theming. So you start out human-sized, of course, and as you make your way through the queue, there are just subtle differences in your surroundings that kind of hint at the fact that you are becoming smaller and smaller, so that by the time you arrive at the loading station, you are supposedly rat-sized. Now, this theming isn't really overt or super noticeable, but like I said, there are a few smaller hallways, kind of tight hallways that kind of go from this beautiful grand French entrance that you have at the beginning of the queue to a more underground environment fit for a rat. Now, these hallways don't go on forever and ever. They're pretty short, but they're definitely worth mentioning if you don't do tight spaces or claustrophobia at all. Now, let's talk about those ride vehicles. Now, this is a trackless ride system, as I mentioned before. It's very similar to Minnie and Mickey's Runaway Railway or even Rise of the Resistance over in Hollywood Studios. And this ride system in particular consists of individual cars that seat up to 6 riders in 2 rows of 3. Now, as far as ride restraints go, you will have a shared lap bar. This is very consistent with other rides in the park that are very similar. It is really the exact same thing that you will find on, say, the Doom Buggies in the Haunted Mansion or in Journey of the Little Mermaid. There is no overhead harness or anything like that, so I don't find these ride restraints particularly confining. Now, last but not least, let's talk about that ride time. This attraction clocks in at around 4 minutes and 40 seconds, which is maybe slightly on the longer side when it comes to attractions like this one. However, this ride is super immersive, very action-packed, and very fun, and this time goes by very fast, at least for me. And now that you have all the facts, let's actually go hop in line. I'm so excited. I actually haven't ridden this attraction since we moved here and became Disney locals, so I just could not be more excited. So let's go ride this together. You'll find the entrance to this attraction in the French Pavilion in Disney's Epcot. You'll actually find a large overhead sign that is near the Skyliners. You'll walk through there and find a completely Ratatouille themed section towards the back of the France Pavilion. There are a couple of little quick service restaurants around here, and of course the main attraction, the actual ride entrance itself. Now, once you enter the line, you will most likely end up back outside. There is a nice covered area here where you'll find a few fans. It really is completely covered from the sun, which is very nice, especially since I was here on a very hot summer day. And in my experience, the line does move pretty quickly once you're actually in line. After winding back and forth in this outdoor area, you will very quickly find yourself back inside into a pretty basic hallway. There isn't just a ton of theming in some of these hallways. They're pretty basic. But the good news is there is definitely AC here, and I find these areas to be pretty comfortable. You'll wind your way back and forth through some of these hallways and finally end up in this beautifully themed little area that looks like you are outside in front of Gusteau's restaurant in Paris. The theming is crazy here. It is so beautiful to look at, and unfortunately, you probably won't be in this area for too terribly long before the line moves on. Now, you'll pass through a couple more interesting little Parisian scenes. There are some cool Ratatouille themed props, and of course, some more windowless hallways. Now, as I said before, some of these hallways can be pretty tight. The line does at least move pretty quickly, but of course, like with any ride, you can be stuck at this queue for quite a while. After you get past these tight hallways, however, you will come across a cast member who will send you on your way so that you can pick up your 3D glasses. After picking up your glasses, you will head off towards the loading station, find another cast member who will ask how many are in your party party and finally sort you into your lane so you can prepare to board. Now, after climbing inside, the lap bar will come down and you will get ready to embark on your fun Ratatouille adventure. Now, once the ride sets off, your little ride vehicle will spin off. You'll see this beautiful rooftop area that you seem to be on. And as the ride vehicles move forward, you will come across your first massive screen. Now, on this screen, you will find Gusteau and Remy, and in a series of unfortunate events, you end up plummeting down through this glass roof and into the kitchen. Now, at this point, the ride hits the ground running, quite literally. Through the visuals on the screen, you will find yourself scampering through this kitchen, dodging all of these obstacles and people and giant feet and brooms, all of these perilous situations that we talked about earlier, and of course, you are the size of a rat, so it can be pretty intimidating. You'll briefly find refuge in the pantry, where you find these giant food items, which I always thought was really cool. However, the peace and quiet in the pantry does not last for long, and you end up back in the kitchen and swept quickly out of the way with the mop before Chef Skinner can find you. Now, at this point, you will accidentally find yourself underneath an oven, and when it is turned on, you will see this quote-unquote fire above you. There will be this heat element that definitely kind of hammers in that immersion, but luckily you were not there for long before scurrying off and ending up in the restaurant itself. Now, it is here that you were actually spotted by Chef Skinner, and a pretty scary pursuit ensues. Now, he chases you throughout the restaurant as you dodge and dive into these little crevices. There are a few moments where he kind of jumps out at you, those jump scares that I was talking about before, but one of them in particular is very intense, at least in my opinion. This moment is quiet and dark, and you feel like you finally gotten away, and all of a sudden, Chef Skinner appears. He lunges forward with his hand outstretched, and you scramble away before anything can happen to you. Now, this moment is loud, it is unexpected, and personally, I find it pretty scary. You are, of course, able to get away, however. Very quickly, you will find yourself back in the kitchen where all the rats are working together. You see some familiar characters, and right as you arrive at the front of the kitchen, a champagne bottle is popped right at you, which of course comes with some of those water effects, and you shoot backwards, sliding into this cute little restaurant area. You'll find Remy and some of our other little rat characters as they enjoy their delicious food. Remy thanks you for your help along this adventure, and you will make your way back out towards the unloading station. Now, once your ride vehicle pulls up, a cast member will raise your safety bar and you will be able to exit the ride vehicle. And exiting this attraction is pretty straightforward. You will make your way down some hallways and very quickly find your way back out into the France Pavilion. And there we have it. What did you think about Remy's Ratatouille adventure? Honestly, this is one of the most immersive and really fun rides in all of Disney World, at least in my opinion. I absolutely adore this ride, but it can definitely be a lot, just depending on the day for me. That sensory overload is really nothing to sneeze at, and some of these simulated thrills can feel pretty intense. However, if none of these things are your triggers and you think you can handle an attraction like this one, I would definitely recommend it. It is really such a blast. As always, if you enjoyed this video and would like to see other ride reviews like it, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Stick around, stay a while. We would love to have you in our little community of anxious riders. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.